Hey everybody, good evening and welcome to the Easy Coach. My name's Ethan Evans, the Easy Coach, and tonight I have Ameesh Paleja here with me. Amish is a longtime coworker of mine. Worked together at Amazon an epic 9 years before he left Amazon to start his own startup at Atom Tickets. He then went on to Stars, and he's now currently at OfferUp back here in Seattle. So it's a reunion of sorts for us. Uh, Paul, I see your comment in the chat. I did, in fact, have tea with honey just shortly before this, but luckily my voice is back. Hopefully, the mic is on, and I have awesome Dave in the background doing all the hovering over the scene button, so I don't have to do that. So, what we normally do here is, Amish is here, getting a lot of highs.
Hi, everyone.
What we normally do is we have a new piece of technology on the screen. You should see a widget where you can put in questions. So to put in questions, you'll have to be logged on or authenticated. But once you are that, you can either enter your own questions. We have a couple in already. Or you can upvote the questions of others. And that lets us know what you'd like to talk about and answer the questions in the order they come. Now, special treat. Awesome Dave built some new tech out on a web page, so those of you on iOS where we don't have the extension can actually navigate there and ask or vote for a question through mobile web. So if you want to do that, Dave, can you hit the, it's right there on screen. Ask questions through the over video panel or through the web. So if you're on mobile, you can hit that link and add a question there, and it will show up as soon as our helpful moderators approve it. So with that, we normally open with a bit of a story. And I was trying to think, my background, I worked at startups for about 15 years before coming to Amazon. And now I've been 14 years with the largest company, one of the largest companies in the world. I think we just announced we're 613,000 employees at the moment.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. When I started, Amish started the year before me. When I started, it was, I think, 14,000. And I thought, oh my God.
I vaguely remember myself being employed 3,000.
Yeah. Which, big company, right?
Right.
3,000. OfferUp now, you said it's 250?
250.
250. Yep. And obviously, Atom Tickets, when you started, it was
0.
1.
Or me, yeah, 1.
1.
Yeah.
I went into 2 startups as number 5. So maybe I'll let you tell the opening story. Talk to us a little bit about the experience of starting your own company.
Starting my own company was terrifying. I was successful at Amazon. I had a good career. I had a good office. I was able to produce and really kind of understood the culture. But I always had this kind of nagging feeling in the back of my head is that could I actually do this on my own without the safety net? And, all of us are kind of familiar with this situation, but we get pitched kind of crazy and dumb startup ideas like, we're going to make auctions for dogs or, they don't make a lot of sense. And I got approached with, from a mutual friend from Lionsgate. And he came to me and said, Amish, there's 5.5 billion unsold seats in the North American theatrical market. And I thought to myself, like, that is like, I knew movie theaters were empty, but I didn't realize they were that empty.
And it certainly wasn't this weekend with Endgame.
No,
they were not empty.
They were not empty. In fact, now they're actually running 72 hours straight in a row. Like they're not even closing. But largely spoken, like it's one of those industries that was kind of like the land before time. Like it wasn't touched by technology, and they, thinking about kind of the whether they're doing personalization or recommendations or good social or good mobile apps. All that stuff was missing. And so I thought to myself, like, if I could just sell 1% of the unsold seats, that's $1 billion business in its own right. And I thought to myself, that's a doable, an achievable option. So that's how we got started. And I put a deck together, started shopping it around town. Lots of interest, lots of thought of like, oh man, this is a really good idea, but we're not sure we want to actually change anything. I would tell you just right now, the Hollywood space is incredibly full of inertia. And so getting people to do anything, even if it's in their own self-interest, is challenging. But after about a year, people came out and said, okay, we're ready to fund this thing. And we went and started it. And it was great. Again, taking the leap and quitting Amazon and quitting a successful career, was definitely a terrifying thing, but I wouldn't trade the experience, now. Like in hindsight, even if it was hard, I learned so much and I grew a ton.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought of this because I was thinking about my Amazon, my paid job career. But in a sense, starting the Easy Coach has been a little bit like that. Like, how do I do this? How do I fit it in with work? Will there be an audience? How will it be successful? It's nothing like going out for your day job and getting funded because I've done that in other startups. But it is that sense of like incredible eager giddiness and also like, except we're everything. There was a time where we were running around looking for how to cover the table because before we had the bookcase, we had a green screen and this table is reflective. And it was reflecting the green screen and then vanishing because it looked green. And so it was being edited out and covered up with whatever was in the background. The point of that is, we'll take the first question now. In a startup, you've got to be willing to do whatever is needed. And if what we needed was a tablecloth, we had to find one for the show that night. So the first question here is awesome, which is, what are the top 3 qualities of a person that would cause you to recommend they pursue work at a startup over a large company, and at a large company over a startup? So I don't know if you have 3 in mind, but I have a couple on both sides. So why don't you take first crack at a couple and I can add to it.
Yeah. So I would say if you have the itch to join a startup, I think one of the biggest qualities going to help you be successful is your ability to be adaptable. Ethan's talking about finding tablecloths. I could tell you in my experience at Adam and now here at OfferUp is that there is no way that I would ever say that's not my job. Right? I've done everything from cleaning bathrooms to walking around town, handing out flyers, to standing on stage and talking to 5,000 people. And many of those things are incredibly uncomfortable for me and not something that I was intending on doing. And you have to be incredibly adaptable on what you're willing to do and how you're willing to do it. But if you have that drive in you to say, if I see a problem, I'm just going to take care of it, I think that's a incredibly strong talent to have to be successful in a startup environment.
Okay. And what about large company?
So
Because you obviously are very successful at Amazon too.
Yeah, I think working in a large company, there's I think a perspective that I think Amazon in particular has its own culture and its own challenges of being successful there. But I think that you really need to be able to kind of dive deep and stay connected with the area that you own. The perspective that I have is, and I think that one of the reasons why I was successful there is that I was able to kind of understand not only the business side, but also my engineering responsibilities pretty deeply. And when people would ask me questions, people would engage with me. They kind of always knew. I think you would always count on me to be able to answer the questions that you would have for me, right? And not end up with kind of a mealy mouth answer or I don't know or this. It was a level of dive deep and ownership that kept driving the ball forward. So,
and more formal in that way. So what I was going to add to this, I think in a large company, the advantage and disadvantage is that your role is defined. Some of this is the opposite of what was said about flexibility in a startup. What I found when I joined Amazon, and I think is true today, is you kind of got to want to do the job you're hired for. And certainly you can branch out and contribute in different areas, but you're very much measured on what it is you were asked to do. So Ameesh and I were both engineering leaders, and pretty much we could contribute to hiring people and our opinions on legal contracts or business deals, but if the product didn't ship bug-free, we were failing. Didn't matter how much window dressing we did contributing elsewhere. My experience in a startup, by comparison, is I have seen people come in from one job and migrate to another, and as long as they're adding enough value in the new job, there's no transfer paperwork. There's no like, oh, well, you came as an engineer, but you're doing all our QA, but we're measuring you as an engineer and you're not the QA guy or you're not the build guy. You're failing. And I think in the more narrow structured part of Amazon, that would, as an example, and other large companies, because I have worked at other big companies, they measure you on what your title says. Um,
Title doesn't matter in a startup.
title doesn't hardly exist.
Yeah, right.
Handed out in part as compensation because you're not going to get paid as much. That's another good point. If you want, it says qualities of a person. Well, if you want paid today, go to a large company.
Right.
If you want a lottery ticket to get paid more tomorrow, go to a startup.
Right. You have to be risk tolerant. It's a huge part of the puzzle. Because if you're not comfortable with that, you're going to always be second guessing, why am I here? What am I doing? You have to believe in the mission of the company and the charter of the company in such a substantial way that you're willing to put your money where your mouth is, right?
Yeah, and a fun story there. At two different startups I worked at, I had to sit down with my team at different times and say, so we're out of money, and the bankers say they're going to give us what's called a bridge loan. And they say it's going to come in before your paycheck's supposed to clear. But I got to be legally, because it's law, I got to be honest with you. If you stay at work today and you come here tomorrow, there's a good chance you won't be paid for those days. Now, luckily, I never actually had pay not show up. But to sit with your team and be like, we need you. It's going to be okay. We're going to get our next round. But by the way, this next week is on you. And thank you. That's the kind of thing you got to be okay with in a startup. I think from a qualities viewpoint, in a big company, it can sound like startups are all great. Big companies, you don't have that risk.
Right.
And you also can be rewarded for only being an expert, for doing the thing that you do best. So I think that's the trade-off is in a large company. The reasons to go there are the structure and are the support and infrastructure where you can worry about your job much less than worrying about the company. Now, certainly large companies have layoffs and no job is guaranteed. But I think there was some smart aleck author who was quoted as saying, if you like gambling, go to Vegas because the odds are known and very predictable. Stay away from software because that's basically way crazier odds and much more stacked against you.
Right. Right.
Okay. So we'll have our moderators go ahead and pop that question off the top. Again, I know the audience builds up over time, so feel free to add anything you want in chat. But if you want to keep asking questions, the interface should be right there on the screen. And you can vote on the questions of others because we run in a Q&A format. So Ameesh and I are going to hang out and chat with each other and chat with you about the questions you ask until you're out of questions. And then we go to dinner. So you got to keep us entertained here. Yeah, it's not me. I'm not entertaining. You are. So the next question is, what are the main differences between the large company and startup environment for the average worker? So not for the founder.
For the average worker, well, I think it goes back to that original point of like, what is your role? Is it well defined or was it not well defined? I think the average person probably isn't going to be very comfortable with not knowing what they're supposed to be doing. Right. I think the ambiguity about day to day, what's going to happen, where do I need to go, where do I need to focus my time, the context switching and changes in business priorities, I think are much more rapid in particularly an early stage startup. Right. In Adam's first days, we were trying to figure out what the right thing to build was, and now here at OfferUp, we kind of know what we need to do. But there is still a level of ambiguity that I would never have experienced at Amazon.
Yeah. So let's see. Interesting learning for the tool here, Dave, is something gets voted up above the current question, they switch.
Yes.
But we were talking about the question here, what are the main differences? So this is technology and development. We'll learn to pin the top question once we start answering it. So that'll be a good learning for us. What are the main differences? In the startup environment for the average worker, one thing I was thinking about is there's no job description. Like, you just come in and maybe you have a title, but like when you want to grow your career at big companies, there's a development process and there's a review process and there's a career guide usually or something that tells you, well, you're a software engineer, and if you want to be a senior software engineer, this is
Right.
kind of what we expect. And at a startup, there's none of that. You make yourself better. You go do the work to figure out what it is. At a small startup, I don't know how long was it, and you had experience with this, so you may have been ahead of the curve, but how long was it before you did performance reviews?
Probably 2.5 years into the company's life cycle. So
And how big was it then?
maybe 50 people.
So for 2 years, the first 50 people, they may have gotten some performance feedback, but like getting the written. Now, a lot of the viewers may be like, I don't like performance reviews. That sounds great. But if you're actually trying to learn and understand, let alone grow, because at Amazon, I've been part of acquiring some small startups. And one of the things is like, when you have a leveling system, suddenly people have to think about their level. Whereas, like when we acquired Twitch, um, Amazon bought Twitch TV, which you're watching right now. Many of the people weren't leveled. Like it just wasn't like that. They were all just software engineers. And so we had to map them into levels and then start giving them feedback and reviews. So I think the difference is all of that structural support. When did you hire your first HR person?
When we hit 100.
When you had 100. So for the first 99 people, when I needed to know something about the insurance plan, who answered it?
I did.
Right.
Right.
That goes to doing everything, but also that probably wasn't your area of expertise.
No, in fact, I have just a funny anecdote about that. What one of my employees and friends, he was having a baby the first week we opened up the office.
Sweet.
And I had never set up a payroll system before, never set up insurance plans before. I have no idea how this stuff is working. And
Talk about risk tolerance.
oh my lord, ADP was like a nightmare and it's super slow. And so they're at the hospital and their insurance is being rejected because it wasn't like keyed into the system properly. So I have like a panicked husband and an angry wife calling me saying, "We're at the hospital about to deliver. Where's the insurance?" And I'm like, hold on a second. I'm gonna start calling. So I start calling every phone number I have. I'm in a panic, going, "Oh my god, we're gonna take care. Like we have to take care of this." I mean, these are the kinds of weird problems that come up that you just don't like. Nobody ever told me how to make that work, right? And so.
Yeah, so the advantage in a large company, right, is all that support around the environment where there's an expert to go to for everything. Because you probably didn't have a court, even though you were in a legal heavy business. Did you ever have in-house counsel?
We brought that person in probably around employee 30 or 40.
So again, all these things that you can just go to. And by the way, Adam Tickets, for a lot of reasons, I would say was a relatively well capitalized startup. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So a lot of startups run for years without any of this.
Correct.
And so I think that's a big difference in the average environment is you just all those corporate structures aren't there.
And by the way, we talked about kind of the lack of corporate structures, but I also think that it's important to call out that for the average person, you have relatively codified safety nets and procedures and policies around if you're doing your job right and if you're being successful, if you're not being successful, what chances do you have to kind of manage that situation? I think one of the tricky things is that in a startup, it's kind of like it's not working. Thanks, you shake hands and you part ways. I don't want to make it seem so cutthroat, but there's not a lot of room to keep dragging on an employee that's just not performing well.
Yeah, at one point, the startup I was a part of did a layoff with no severance at all. Called a bunch of people into the room and said, "Hey, we're dead broke. Sorry, today's your last day." And what are we getting? What's our package? I don't know. Would you like to take a soda with you? Now that was poorly run, and I'm not proud to have been a part of that particular environment. But you got to be tolerant of that risk, which you're going to hear a lot. So This is a really good question. Thank you. And I see others are being voted on. The next one's going to be a doozy, guys. So the great thing about having a guest is I get to let him answer them first. So we'll go ahead and drop down the list here. And so the next question here is when looking at job listings for Seattle startups, and obviously we're sitting in Seattle, but you could be anywhere, the jobs are nearly all technical. How would someone who doesn't write code find a foothold in a startup?
That's a great question. So, startups have all sorts of positions open. The vast majority of the recruiting effort, particularly in this market in Seattle, is focused technically. But what I would say is like send an email to one of the contact aliases and say, hey, I'm here. I actually had a friend just yesterday actually send me an email saying my office manager is leaving San Diego. They're coming up to Seattle. Do you have any openings for them? And I knew internally that there was an events planner opportunity and a coordinator opportunity. So I think networking obviously helps. I don't think that you're going to find the level of effort and rigor around some of these other roles within the company. Not because they're not important; they're critically important in making sure the office runs smoothly and that we have all of our different aspects of the business running properly. It's just a byproduct of the competitiveness of the Seattle market, which is causing all the engineering roles to kind of bubble to the top. So I would tell you kind of hook or crook, go figure out what the right way to get in your foot in the door is. At Adam, we actually had a lady come to the office and she kept submitting her resume over and over and over again to be our office manager. And we put her through an interview loop, but like I looked at it and just said the tenacity of that and the will around it was just like very impressive. And the fact that she had done some research, she had figured out who we were, where we were, it wasn't very public at that point.
Right.
And so that kind of chutzpah is rewarded.
Yeah, and I was going to add exactly that, which is if you're non-technical, the good thing about a startup, the bad thing is they're dead broke a lot. The good thing is they don't have like an annual budget in the same strict sense. So they're planning on adding a marketing person, which may be your background, or they're planning on adding whatever it is you do that isn't coding. But it's not their most urgent need. At the same time, if someone shows up, they don't have to say, well, we don't have a position open for that. And so I think a lot of what I've seen people get into startups is saying, look, I'm interested in what you do, and this is what I do. And yeah, you may not be planning on adding your lawyer yet or your HR generalist yet, but how could I fit? Could I double up as HR plus office manager until you're big enough? Or could I be marketing and PR? And so you take one of those and jobs, but basically you put yourself forward and say, hey, I'm available. And I actually have been talking to a friend of mine. He has a non-traditional background. He's a sometimes viewer of the show. I don't know if he's here right now, but he's coming off a different background that doesn't fit well. Specifically, and a few of you may know who I'm talking about, he spent years as a professional poker player. So his background in what he used to do, which is IT and product management, is stale. And I've kind of told him, look, generally smaller companies are going to have more ability to look past what your resume says because there isn't an HR person screening it. So if you can reach a real human and say, yeah, but let me tell you how being a professional poker player made me better for this, way more chance that never gets through the same friend has poked the Amazon beast a few times trying to get interest. And his resume is just going into a black hole because it doesn't have the top buzzwords in the last 5 years of work. So I would say the last thing I would say is don't shoot for a startup of 3 or 5 people.
No.
They need to get their demo running. If it's a tech startup, you want to go a little bigger. Now, if it's a different industry, a marketing startup, a marketing agency, or again, I don't know what the person who originally submitted this question does, that might be fine. But go a little bigger.
And I think genuine desire and an interest to kind of take whatever opportunity is available, I think, just to echo Ethan's point, is very impressive. Like it's one of the things that you like kind of look at the candidate and say, this person really wants to be here. They want to join us. Like that, and that when you're in a situation where everything feels really hard and everything feels very speculative, and somebody says, "I want to get on the boat with you," you take it seriously. So I think that's a big part of it.
Completely. And these are great questions. Thanks for keeping them coming. So we'll move on. I've heard that networking is key to getting local tech jobs. Are there differences to how to network into a job in a startup versus a large company?
I think networking into a startup obviously puts you on a much more direct path on getting hired. Like if I know somebody or somebody who I know recommends somebody, like it just immediately moves into kind of an interview process without a whole lot of oversight or rigor, like procedural rigor around it. I think some large companies are good at taking advantage of referrals, but sometimes they move slowly, and that's where I would tell you that I try to take advantage of it as somebody working in a startup. It's like, yeah, it'll take you 2 months to get a referral through Microsoft, as an example, because they just move slow. I'll have an offer to you in 3 days if you're the right fit, right? And that's the kind of big difference between the two. But I think in terms of how you network, I think it's the people you know, the people you reach out to, people you've worked with in the past. I think secondary references are also very powerful. So, I know Ethan, and if Ethan came to me and said, "This person's great, you really should talk to them," I have a level of trust with him that I would immediately extend to that person.
Yeah, I think startups are trickier to network into because they're smaller. So there's fewer targets you can reach. You've got to get, if it's 10-person startup, networking means getting a hold either directly or indirectly with one of those 10. Again, some big company in Seattle, I would think everyone is within 1 degree of someone at Amazon. The drawback of everyone being within 1 degree of someone at Amazon is that person may be many departments away from the job you want. And so one of the differences is, do you want a particular job or do you want a job?
Yeah.
Because if all you want is a job, number one, a startup may not be the right place. But second, large company, there's lots of those. When you're trying to get into a specific group at a large company, some of the same rules apply, which is you have to reach that small set of people. But I don't, much like Ameesh, I don't think how you network is that different. I also would say Amazon right now hires about 30% of its people through internal referrals. So it's a huge number. And that's common across different divisions. It's probably even more in startups because they have no search budget.
Right.
So it's all friends of friends.
Right.
So honestly, networking is a great way to get a job, and a lot of it is legwork. I often recommend books here. I think this one's on our book list, which is on the Easy Coach website under books as a tab, and that's What Color is Your Parachute? And the book What Color is Your Parachute talks about how to build a network, how to use a network, and I think that's a fantastic place to get some of that.
By the way, I have 30 open roles in a startup in Seattle. So if you know Ethan or Dave or me, you don't be shy.
Well, you know him now. He's Ameesh Paleja, new chief technology officer at OfferUp.
Yep.
So let's see. We have Monty Cheese put a question into chat. Maybe you can move that over into our question interface. We'd love to answer it there. I think we're good on the networking differences. I will say put effort into a network before you need it.
Yes.
Do your networking. If you only go to your network when you need it, not as great. Any advice? We'll go to this next question, got put to the top, which is perfect. Any advice for deciding the right balance between equity and salary offered? Have you taken equity in a startup in exchange for receiving a smaller salary? I'll let you take this first, but I have experience on this for sure.
Yes. So the simple answer is yes, a substantial change. And what I would say is that the way my thought process was basically this, is that I think looking at total comp is a big part of the puzzle, but I think the balance of risk and reward is really based on your tolerance. For me, I looked at it and said, can I live a lifestyle that I would be happy with within the current framework of the cash compensation of the salary that I get? And am I willing to take the risk? Do I believe in the company and the mission of the company that I believe the risk is worth the upside that it's going to come to it? So I'll give you a very simple case in point. And this largely, in particular startups, largely depends on what stage the startup is actually in. So if you come in super, super early, you're going to get paid peanuts, and you might feel like I have to eat ramen to kind of get by, right? But the upside of it is that you're actually taking, a significant percentage of the company. We're talking percentage points if you're coming in pretty early. If you come in later, though, the scale goes down, but the company's much more successful and they're paying you a reasonable salary, and you're able to afford your rent and food, and you're not worried about, like, do I go to the grocery store this week or next week? Like, that kind of stuff goes off the table. So you can kind of gauge your risk and balance your risk by just picking what stage of a startup you're in. But oftentimes I hear like, oh, I'm about to join Lyft, or I'm about to join Pinterest, and as a few weeks ago, and they're offering me X equity. And I look at it in an offer up, and I look at it and say, well, I'm offering you Y equity, but my upside, should we be successful, is 5X what it's worth today. If you go to something that's about to like IPO or about to kind of get to the right space, maybe you only see a 20% increase. And so again, you're kind of going between kind of risk and reward, but I think it really depends on your personal situation and what your kind of monthly needs are and your cash flow needs to kind of balance those two questions.
Yeah, this one's it is a lot of balance on your situation. I've taken equity quite a bit in startups, lost it all, by the way. I have the glorious track record that no startup I ever worked for went under, but other than the first one in the beginning of my career, which got me addicted to this path, none of them ever went anywhere either. And I sunk money into I sunk money in this way. So what I would say about it is you can almost always negotiate a smaller salary for more equity if you want. Be careful not to put yourself in a position where you're going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
Because my experience with equity, and it's true in almost every case, I'm going to guess this is true in Atom Tickets, just from what I know of your history, is when you thought payday was coming and when payday actually showed up, may have been a while apart.
Right.
They are a lottery ticket, and some, there are the Googles and the Facebooks where people make, crazy go endow a university wealth, and obviously early Amazon as well. But generally, like if someone's telling you, oh, hey, we're going to be flipped in 2 years and this is all going to be liquid. No, a startup cycle's 5 to 7 or 8 from founding is pretty typical for an exit.
Right. And I think whatever you hope it is, just tack on another year or two because it's just you never know what's going to come up. And I think the other big trend that's actually happening right now in the industry is that companies are staying private longer. They're not going public when 10 years ago they would have been like a slam dunk IPO. Look at something like Uber. They've stayed private a significant amount. They're making multiple billions of dollars in revenue, where the normal kind of wisdom of the crowds is if a company's making $100 million in net revenue, they're listable.
They can go out.
Yeah. And so many companies are deciding not to do that, and they just keep staying private longer and longer. And now you hear about these guys who, I invested $100,000 in Uber when it first started, and now it's worth $300 million. And you're like, that's why that's happening. So you should, any startup that you join now, you should just have it in the back of your head that, if the company's good and the financials are good, you should expect that it's going to stay private longer than you think.
Yeah. Completely agree with that. Just plan to be patient. And so don't trade yourself into a hole. For example, consider setting a limit on that. Like, I will trade 2 years of salary for this, but then my salary returns to this number or something else, because who knows? I have no idea, of course, of the asker's situation. But let's say, young single person joins a startup. 3 years later, they've traded in salary, but now they want a house and they want to start a family. They're in a hurt locker. And The other thing, I remember being in a startup and I had done this and it was time for them to bump my salary back.
Yeah.
And even though it was in writing, they're like, the CFO came to me and Dave will know this CFO. And the CFO said, well, see, we're on a voyage across a desert on a camel. I'm like, okay. And we only have so much water. And you're asking for more water. And I'm like, I'm asking for you to do what the letter says, you know.
Right.
So future promises of we'll adjust your salary, those are only as true in a startup as the money allows.
That's right.
No one intends to, well, hopefully no one intends to lie to you. But when there's no money, which is why I was getting the camel lecture.
But and we've been talking about the risk side of this, but the reward side is equally good, right? If it does hit, the compensation difference that you could have from a startup to a big company could be 3x what you would have normally earned, 5x what you could have normally earned, right? And that's the risk reward that you're looking at, right? And if you believe in the company and you are able to kind of ride through it in a way that you feel comfortable with the compensation that you have coming in and your needs are being met, then you'll be reasonably mentally satisfied and you can keep working without always worrying about, should I go someplace else? Should I do this? If that's already in your head right when you start, then it's probably the wrong thing. But if you're feeling like, no, this thing is going to be a triple, if not a home run, then you're thinking about it in the way that the startup founders would want you to think about it.
Yeah, this is a great point. We'll move on in a second, but I can share my first startup. My college roommate joined earlier than I did. He went in at about person 45, which is not tiny, but substantial. He went in as person 45 and crucially pre-IPO. And he was a millionaire at 25. And when we saw he was headed there, we actually made this thing that he had to buy us this fancy bottle of wine when he became a millionaire. And being an engineer, he insisted later that it was a post-tax millionaire. So when he actually got to his equity being worth $1 million after Uncle Sam's chunk, we got the wine. Now, I went in as employee 220. And what I got out of that was a down payment on a house. Specifically, I got $37,000. So the timing difference, now that was
back in 1922, that's big money.
Thank you, Ameesh. Very kind. Yes, that's right. It was a big house. No. But timing matters. So anyway, we've answered the hell out of that. A common theme here is reaching a human to discuss a potential job opportunity. Do you think the entire HR and recruiting process needs to change in the future?
Yes. I mean, I think that it's not an incredibly scalable or efficient model today. I feel like there's startup after startup that's trying to innovate and disrupt in this space, but the reality is I don't actually have a good answer of how I would actually change it. As I said, I'm really focused on my network and how do I go and hire and people coming to me. But I would tell you it's definitely the most stressful part of my job is to figure out how to recruit and hire appropriately.
Well, it's interesting. One of the reasons we end up with HR process and recruiting process, this has happened at Amazon after you left, is fear. Fear that the legal paperwork won't be right or you'll hire somebody. Startups at some level, while they want to follow the law in general terms, they want to succeed. And that doesn't mean they'll hire someone with no job documentation, but they're also not interested in analyzing every possible thing. There is, I know of a case in a company where someone had lied on their resume and got caught and they were fired. And that's a very big company thing. The truth is, at a startup, if someone was kicking ass in their job and it later came out that the MBA they said from Wharton wasn't real, they might have some issues, but I'm just guessing at Adam, if they were killing it, you wouldn't have gated them.
No.
You'd have been like, what the hell?
Yeah, I'd be like, dude, why are you doing this? But I would not, if they were productive, I absolutely would not have fired them.
And so, whereas, I have never had to specifically, personally walk someone out for that. but that's the kind of thing that at a larger company, could just be like, nope, you didn't have what you said you had, you're gone. The point here is HR process ends up in place for a lot more reasons because big companies above 50 people, new laws apply.
Yep.
There's all this auditing, blah, blah, blah. It's definitely, you're always better off reaching a live person. I think recruiting comes in because the thought is a specialist can be faster. A specialist can do this more. It's their full-time job. It's their passion. And as a company grows, the founder of a company is motivated to do the hard work of hiring. The 50th person in, probably not as motivated to spend their day doing that. They're like, hey, I'm a coder, I'm a marketer, I'm whatever. But I'm not a recruiter. Why am I having to do this? And that's where recruiting comes from, I think. Any thoughts on that?
I think you're right, and I constantly am fighting with my management team to make sure that they know that it's not recruiting's job to fill the role, it's yours. And there's a natural, like, exactly what you said, that like I have other stuff to do, like let me go do my normal job, and I'm like, your normal job is actually to fill the team as well. And so there's a complex tension there. So I would say, like, that's one of the reasons why I would say it's a challenging question. I don't think there's a great answer to it.
But that goes to that large company, small company question we had near the beginning of the broadcast, which is whatever your profession is, you're a product manager, you're a graphic designer. If you're the sort of person who wants to put effort into other parts of the company, like choosing your teammates, startup fit. Mm-hmm. If you're the sort of person who wants to mostly have someone else do all the paperwork and scheduling for the next candidate, large company fit. Mm-hmm. Because in a startup, being like, yeah, I don't, why would I interview other designers? Like, that's not my job.
Right.
Doesn't fly. Everything is your job. In a larger company, it changes a little bit. So yeah, this is like one, someday we'll do a whole easy coach on how to scale human organizations. And that it's a beast.
It's a beast. That has a lot of dimensions to it. Not only organizationally, how you design the org, but how you motivate people, all sorts of other stuff. So it's interesting. I'll be in the chat room.
Yeah.
Peanut gallery. Probably got
well,
questions.
Ameesh has experience here he's not talking about in a sense because he probably hasn't called to mind. When we built the Amazon App Store together, he opened our Orange County office. And there was, for different reasons, our HR at that point, because he was opening a new office, was in Las Vegas. And so to staff the office, Ameesh and I and we flew interviewers down from San Francisco and we went to a hotel because our office was a dump.
Right.
We went to a hotel in Newport Beach and interviewed people in conference rooms.
Yep.
But we had to do like all the scheduling. So even you can get some of the startup experience in the right large company experience.
That's right. I do think that's, at that time in Amazon's history, we were new to creating these remote offices, so there wasn't a lot of clarity or process around it. So, in fact, the candidates that came in for those interviews, I remember I posted a Craigslist puzzle. I posted on Craigslist for a job, and I made a very complicated technical problem that had a very, very simple solution. And so immediately I was getting like thousands of submissions over the course of like a couple of weeks. And I'm like, how am I going to look through this? But the reason why I made the answer be so simple is because I could immediately say, okay, the answer is 5. Just put it in the yes bucket. I'll look at it. If they came up with a longer answer, I just threw it away. And that's how we ended up sourcing 50, 60 different candidates that we interviewed at this.
I've never heard that story. I didn't know that part. Or I've forgotten it.
Yeah, it's it was a scrappy way to just figure out how to get people in the pipeline.
I just remember these really long days where we would sequentially interview like 8 or 9 people at 45 minutes a clip, and then we'd all get in a conference room, and you're trying to remember like who was number 3,
right,
who was Ronald, so not very flattering again, but hopefully it worked out. So we'll go ahead to the next question.
By the way, that site is now 1,500 people or something like that.
Yeah, multiple buildings.
It's crazy.
Irvine, California. It's got a Twitch office. It's got game studios. It's got Amazon Fresh.
So I think we did a pretty good job. Like I left when it was around 500, and now it's more than doubled in size.
Yeah, big office.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and go to the next question, and we're getting through them, so keep them coming. This is fantastic. So when starting a startup, how does one decide how long to bootstrap versus going out and seeking rounds of funding?
So this is a great question. So when I started Atom, I had a very clear perspective of what kind of team I wanted to hire and how I wanted to build this thing. And it was, good or bad, right or wrong, I don't know. I think it was probably the right decision for me, was that I wanted to hire fewer people that were all very senior. So, in Amazon parlance, all kind of strong SD2s or SD3s. And there was no way I was going to pull these people out of larger companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google, Oculus, etc., without actually having some money. And so the process that I went through is I said, you know what? I'm going to come up with the idea. I had a deck. I went and shopped it around town. And after about 14 months, we got to the place where we got a bite on funding. And once, the thing about funding is that once somebody bites, everybody wants a piece of it. You can kiss 50 frogs, and until one says, this is a bad analogy, until one says yes, again, it's a terrible analogy. Somebody's got to say yes. They all move like herds. And so as soon as I got a little bit of traction, then I got all the traction, and then immediately we were able to raise $10 million on just a deck, right? And so then I was able to say, okay, well, I have cash in the bank. I have the opportunity to hire some really talented engineers to come and build this thing with me. I can pay for my office space, and I have runway for at least 18 months. And so I said, okay, this puts me in the right spot. Let's go.
So I think a lot of bootstrapping versus not, great answer. Depends on how capital intensive your business is and how deep your pockets are. So, for example, a business you would think is crazy capital intensive, which is content delivery networks. Ameesh and I, early in our career, worked with these crazy guys at a place called Limelight Networks, that they all had deep enough pockets. They had actually bootstrapped a hardware company with co-location facilities and servers by reaching into their hip pockets and pulling out the millions. And so as a result, the four founders owned a crazy amount long into it, because when they eventually wanted to go for funding and needed more, they had revenue, they had customers. Yeah. So how long you bootstrap versus going out and seeking rounds of funding is this trade-off between your risk tolerance and your wealth. If you want to maximize your crazy return and you have the ability, you bootstrap forever. And there are those companies that never take funding. Very few, but possible. On the other hand, Atom Tickets took funding day one. And
we took a big slacking on the dilution of the company, but we also felt like there was a lot of psychological safety associated with that.
Correct. You can hire differently. You can hire people who can take risk. You can hire people who require more salary. Because a lot of those early bootstrap, if you can't do it all yourself, then you can only hire people who can come bootstrap with you and take equity. So the thing I would say is probably more startups, all startups eventually die for lack of money if they die. Now, their lack of money may be caused by lack of customers. It may be caused by lack of good product, but they all die because of lack of money. Like, that's the proximal cause. So the key to the trade-off here is don't get yourself down to your last dollar. I have a friend who invested an awful lot of his personal money trying to get something started not too long ago. He was smart enough not to go like completely all in where he couldn't get out, But, as that went on, it was obviously on his mind. Like credit cards going up, bank account going down, success not here. Having funding in the bank gives you more chance to look longer as opposed to having to look for like, what can I do to make money tomorrow?
Right. And that is a big difference on like how I operated the company. I would have made very short-term optimized decisions if I needed to get money in the bank. Whereas I was able to kind of build a great beta product, make sure I tested it, go out into small test markets in the middle of, Tennessee and Ohio and try this stuff, and that got me to the place where, I was able to make the next round of funding pretty substantial.
Yeah. And that's another thing. It's the sequence of rounds of funding. You're generally trying to bootstrap or stretch your initial funding until you have like the provable demo or the first reference customer. It's not a straight line. Getting from idea to demo is worth a ton of money. Getting from demo to first using customer is worth a ton of money, and then getting to first paying customer, and then getting to break even. And like getting halfway to break even is not worth half the money of being at break even. It's worth some of it. Getting a customer who says they're going to pay versus like having the check.
Right.
You may have a contract that says they'll pay. That's worth some, but like, no, look, $100,000 from Acme Inc., worth way more. Great question. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on. So this is the one that came in first. So I'm glad towards the end of the hour we got back to it. Which is the true unicorn, more rare? A startup reaching $1 billion valuation or a successful startup offering unlimited untracked vacation that genuinely expects and allows their employees to use it as needed to recharge? So obviously someone a little tongue-in-cheek about which is more rare. Take the question any way you want.
So I'll start off by saying that actually is OfferUp right now. Like we're a unicorn here in the Pacific Northwest, and we do give an unlimited vacation balance. What I would say is that it's untracked insofar as people are performing well. The places where it irritates kind of management and everybody else is where if you're a poor performer and you're taking a ton of vacation, then people kind of lose their damn mind over it. I would say the kind of unlimited vacation policy is getting more and more common. I think Netflix has it. Other
Netflix
places
almost pioneered it.
Right. It's one of those things where I tell you, it's only as good as you take advantage of it. Adam has an unlimited vacation policy, and I'll tell you, like, I didn't take a whole lot of vacation, and most of the staff didn't. Not because they weren't allowed to, but because everybody was just like, that's not what we do. Like, it was a cultural piece. So I think a lot of it has to go to how the company culture is set up and how people kind of think about it amongst themselves and amongst the leadership. So I think both are rare. Getting to $1 billion valuation and actually having a company that wants you to take some mental rest and be recharged, I think are both tricky, but you can find them.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this because I was thinking, Twitch has an unlimited untracked vacation. They also sold to Amazon for $970 million. And so actually, and then the stock went up. They were bought in stock and the equity went up from when they were bought. So I joined Twitch after that, but I know the founder and obviously people there very well. And they are this in the sense of they hit the $1 billion valuations. So they definitely provably check the one side of the unicorn, and they have the untracked unlimited. So were they honest about it? I know in later years as the company grew, they put out an expectation, and they said unlimited untracked means around 4 weeks. They never track it, but they put out just to like, this is what we mean by it. And then they do actually encourage people to take it because of the health and wellness. Mm-hmm. That said, at least in an early startup, honestly, it's about survival. And the idea is you're trading in 2 years of vacation or 3 years of vacation on the hope of making your equity more valuable. And vacation's really limited to like realistically, it's limited to what do you need to be sane and what do you need for like medical or whatever else. And that's just, startups are about passion. And if you're not that into it, that's another one of those signs that you should pick a larger company.
Right. If you're going to a startup because they have unlimited vacation, that's the wrong thing to be doing.
Yeah. Now I do remember when we were starting Amazon Video, I went to DivX. I don't think you were on that trip. I don't remember. Did you go down to
No.
Div? But they had surfboards in their restroom,
Right.
Because they were down in Laguna or wherever,
Right.
And so I don't know, startups. They had full size surfboards, so maybe some companies are different, but probably this question was intended to have to be funny.
Yeah.
You can't go to a startup for vacation. It's got to be because you believe in the mission. Now, I'd hope you believe in the mission in a larger company, but it's just different. The mission includes vacation.
Right.
Like, that's why you go to startup or why you go to larger companies.
Yeah,
benefits.
That's right. It's a much more structured environment, and you have less skin in the game and more kind of understandable benefits, or consistent benefits. Maybe is the best way to put it.
So we're almost at the end of our hour, which is fantastic. We also have nothing but one vote questions left. So we'll give everybody a prompt. If there's one of those you want us to answer, hit them up, drop into either the link that's out on our external webpage. Dave, maybe you can push it into chat one more time. Or give us a vote here in the interface. So one of them's popped up. It says at a larger company, it's okay to experiment and sometimes not succeed and then learn from that and iterate. Is that even possible in a startup?
I think the simple answer is yes. I mean, that is what startups are, as they're experimenting with, opportunities to engage customers and create revenue. I would tell you that the risk around a failure is measured much more thoughtfully and carefully before we actually execute it. If we didn't experiment at Atom or at OfferUp, I don't think we would be growing the same way that we are today. So I think experimentation, I think, is a huge part of the culture. But I think everybody in the back of their head is also thinking that, like, I can only take so much risk to go do X, And I think about Amazon, and we took a risk on phones, right? We made Fire Phone. That was a huge risk, right?
And it didn't work out.
It didn't work out. But what I would say is that the company learned a ton from that experience. And I wouldn't characterize it as like a huge failure, because I think we've optimized other parts of the business, and you have things like Fire TV and Alexa and tons of other things that came out of the organizations that we built to support that feature. So I think the size of the risk and the tolerance of the risk, I think, are different depending on it. Like, when we're at a startup, we're like, should we A/B test this one, different ad product? We're loading ads from this vendor. Should we switch to that vendor? And it's like, what's the worst that could happen? We lose money for a couple of weeks and then we switch back. But taking a swing at, like, we're going to go make some hardware, that's the kind of stuff that only a big company could bear.
Yeah, the way I think about this is every startup I've ever worked for or known about, their idea evolves. They end up going through one or more pivots to something new and different than what they intended. Like there may be some startup where they can honestly tell you, maybe Google's the startup, I don't know, that what we built was what we thought we were going to build, and we actually didn't have to change anything. But every startup I'm aware of, the idea evolves, which is really the result of them experimenting. The thing I would say is different is the rigor of those experiments. I think startups move on a lot more intuition and early signal. In other words, an experiment, maybe the founder going home and chatting with 5 people. Or, like in Amazon, we run these experiments and we have data scientists in Twitch too, who are very picky. Sorry, if they're listening, hi, I love you. See, that'll now get replayed. I know exactly who's going to email me. They know what statistical significance is, and they won't say the experiment was valid until X number of users have used it this many times, and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, at a startup, hey, the clicks are running 2-to-1 for blue. It's blue.
Right.
And that's, well, how long did you run that? I don't know. It's 7 on the nose, and we started at 5:45 because speed matters. Dave, our producer here, and I both work for the now pretty defunct early search startup Lycos, and one of the guys there had been a Navy pilot, and they had this saying in the Navy: "Speed is life." Because the faster plane, the plane that is moving faster, has more options because it's easy to slow down and not very easy to speed up. And so that got applied to our startup, and it's very true. Speed is life because you're burning capital, and big companies have it and small companies don't.
Right.
So we're at 7 o'clock. We've answered all the questions with multiple votes. I'm gonna save my own voice, which is still hoarse from last week, and thank our guest here. So Ameesh from OfferUp, he's got lots of open roles. Please go fill them. You relocate people?
Yes, we do.
Do you sponsor?
We do sponsor immigration
you
visas.
sponsor immigration visas. That's tougher at the moment.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
it's a journey, not a destination.
That's right. That's right.
And of course, my org has openings too. But tonight we'll funnel anybody interested to OfferUp.
Thank you.
Couple quick notes. I forgot to give my usual disclaimer. When I'm talking here, I'm talking as the Easy Coach. I don't represent either Amazon or Twitch. I'm talking out of my experience. And the other thing I'd say is we've moved permanently to weekdays, thanks to Game of Thrones, but also because we think that's probably better for a professional audience. And so we'll be back next Tuesday, May 7th, with how to accelerate your career. So some specific things I've learned on how to move your career faster. So we hope you'll join us for that. And thank you very much.
Thank you.